Welcome to the Deeper Dive podcast of Hopevale Church, where we take the message from the weekend and keep the conversation going during the week. I'm Cathy Davis. I'm hosting today, and I am here with Brent Ferris.
That's me.
Thanks for coming in. I know you had a full weekend.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah. Nah, this is one of my favorite parts.
I know. It's like, what do you normally do on Monday mornings, though? Like, is it a work day for you, or did you have to, like, haul yourself here?
Yes, it is a work day for me.
Yeah.
So I prefer a Friday, Saturday schedule. So Mondays, and everything is so fresh
Yeah.
from yesterday that even just getting in, taking a couple of hours and writing it all down
Right.
sets up the whole week
Right.
for me. And I think just Mondays in general are good days because kind of it's low key.
Right.
You know, some guys take Mondays off
I
and
know.
you have a little bit more space to think, and it's kind of nice.
Uh-huh. Dan's played with that over the years, you know, whether Monday's off, Friday's off, half day here, blah, blah, blah. And I think, too, he prefers to come in on Mondays because everything's just churning and you want to talk to the Lord about it and get some balls rolling and whatever.
Yeah, and you got to deal with you have to deal with the aftermath
Yeah.
of being in a position where you're proclaiming the gospel, and there's a whole set of warfare and all that comes with that. And
Yeah.
it's like insecurities, and it's all in there.
Yeah.
And you got to come in, you got to say, okay, God, you
Yeah.
and me, man.
Yeah.
Restore my soul.
Right.
Refresh my soul. Give your soul a little bit of time to catch up to your body in some ways.
Yeah. So yesterday you taught in Saginaw, so was in Bay City, too. And when you and Dan are doing this 4-week series together, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yours was yesterday, Can We Trust the Bible, which is part of the We Believe series, right?
Yep.
So Dan was talking, Is God Real? You talking, Can We Trust the Bible? And so when Dan tapped you on the shoulder and said, hey, let's do this together, one, why do you think he chose you? And two, how did it make you, like, what'd you feel about that?
Oh, yeah. I think Dan does a great job at putting the right people in the right spots.
So you're the right guy for this.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think that
I do too. I'm just
I
asking.
appreciate it. Yeah. I think in this too, I think it's a stretching one for me too. It allows me to kind of flex some range in my teaching.
Yeah.
And I know that he knows that as he's observed with us in the resident program, we've pulled him in to kind of teach some of this stuff to them. And I think he fell in love with the fact that, I mean, all of our young adults are eating this up.
Yeah.
And doing the young adult stuff, I think it was a natural selection as well. There's a friendly face for all the young adults.
Yeah.
And I think this one needs a little bit more passion than some others. And so for me to be up there is a little bit more energetic.
Yeah.
And to step in and really get after some things that are really, really important.
Right.
I think. So I don't know exactly if that's his why,
Yeah.
but for me, that's his why. And I'll sleep well at that. you
Yeah.
know?
And you were like, wait, I got a million things to do. Maybe next time. Or you're like, I guess I will. Or you're like, yeah, bring it on. I'm in.
Yeah, bring it on, I'm in. Yeah, I love expanding the teaching. For 10 years, I've been teaching young people, and I love getting everyone in the room, and I get jazzed up about it. I was at last week's service, and Dan opening it up, and I mean there was just this energy in the room that as people are starting to be like, okay, hold on, and I call that tension. And so the people are looking at this tension, and it's just in the room. You can feel it, and it's the whole series kind of brings forth the tension just in general, because these are normal questions people ask, and nobody really knows how to step into them.
Yeah.
And so when he gave me the shot, I was like, oh yeah, let's do it. That
Yeah.
sounds great.
I've said this a lot of times before, but I hope we go to a church where people are free to ask questions and live in a tension, even if it's not a pat answer, quick fix. Do we believe in the Bible? Can we trust the Bible? Yes. Next, move on. No, we're going to go there.
Right.
We're going to ask the questions. Some of them we might need to chew on a little longer, and we're just going to go there, and it's okay. So I was thinking yesterday, you brought up that you were raised in a Christian home in the church, and you went through a period where you maybe asked some questions. I thought I'd just kind of throw it out to you because there are people that are listening that maybe grew up similarly. Like, I didn't grow up in the church, and so I'm like, oh, this is not done? Are people always allowed to ask questions? Like, what was your experience with the church and asking deeper questions of faith?
Yeah, I just got to the spot where, I mean, I had just broken up with a relationship, and I realized that I had never really explored this.
This meaning is Jesus.
Faith, is Jesus the guy?
Yeah.
You know, what is that about? I had realized that I had been coattailing my parents' faith for a while.
Yeah.
And I believed in God. I didn't not believe in God or not believe in Jesus. I believe they existed, but I wanted to know why I believed it.
Yeah.
I want to know, why is this a thing? I need some evidence. And I'm a skeptic at heart. So I get really critical and love that about myself, because it's just how my brain works. And to step in and really explore, is Jesus the only way? I mean, that question coming up on week 4, I've lived, and I explored multiple religions. I went to multiple different options and just was like really encapsulated with, what is this about?
Yeah.
Someone give me something good. And I kept coming back to the person of Jesus, and I couldn't shake it. I'm like, this makes sense. It doesn't make sense that this isn't true to me. I don't know who dies for something that's not true. And as all of that came through, I finally just said, all right, if this is true, if Jesus is real, then I got to know him for me. And I went through a phase of just reading the Gospels.
Oh.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. And it went Luke, John, Matthew, Mark in that order. And I just ripped it up like I never heard it before. And I went into it saying, like, what if I've never heard this before?
Yeah.
Write notes. I got a whole journal I keep with me. I mean, it's a really fun process. And God had some really beautiful moments with me in that process. And I realized that I'm definitely a little bit less conservative in my faith than my parents. And that's not bad. It's just a little bit more charismatic.
It's such a weird word, conservative. I don't know what that means. In your expression of faith?
Maybe my expression of faith. Yeah. I'm a little bit more risk taker in my faith.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit more like, hey, God is actually in control, and it doesn't make sense, but I'm going for it.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. And so like I moved to Denver
Yeah.
to go to seminary with no job, no place to live. I said, I'll figure it out when I get there, because if God wants me to go, I'm going.
Right.
And that for my dad blew his mind. He's like, wait, hold on. What do you mean you don't have a plan? I said, I got a plan. I'm going with God wherever he takes me.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been my whole career since I took that journey. That's kind of just, God, wherever you're taking me. And it's not like a voice from the heavens. It's just, there's like 80% of me knows what I have to do, and the other 20% is trying to talk me out of it.
Right.
And that's how I know that the Holy Spirit's really working in my world. And I usually sit in those moments for a while to really just identify what it is that God wants from me. And then typically he's telling my wife the same thing, and separately, which is super interesting. And, I guess it's a coincidence, right? But, I don't believe that.
Right.
So
absolutely
seeing God work in our lives like that. I mean, I remember when we moved from Denver to Texas, and the first time I got a phone call to move to Texas, I told Dana, and she was like, yeah, no. And I was like, I don't want to go to Texas. That sounds terrible.
Right.
And then like the next week, we both were like, I think we have to go to Texas. This stinks. What are we going to do? We just got established here. And,
right.
And then we're like, whatever God wants, we're going.
Yeah.
So that's been our lives for a long time. 10 years, actually, next week. Or 2 days, sorry.
2 days, you're going to celebrate your 10-year anniversary. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
To both of you.
Yeah.
So has God shown up 10 years?
Yeah, he shows up every time. Yeah, he's shown up in the highs, and he's shown up in the lows. And I think it was those journeys that allowed us, when everything happened in our lives, it was easy to just sit in his presence, because we didn't know anything else. He had 10 years of experience sitting in that and saying, okay, God, wherever you're going, but we don't like this one.
Yeah.
Like this one hurts more.
Yeah.
And it's been beautiful.
I love seeing your eyes in that.
Oh, sorry.
I wish everyone was watching on YouTube so they could see Brent is passionate about Jesus and his family and what God is teaching and the way that God uses you. And we're thankful to have you here, Brent.
I'm honored.
Thank you for
you.
that. Okay. You have an inside view to the 20-something crowd. Younger, even 20-something
people.
Yeah. So we need to know, because I'm like, oh, you talk about, can you trust the Bible? And I'm thinking about the people I know, and we just like, I guess we can because my parents told me or my pastor told me when I was 13 or whatever. And like, without questioning, a lot of us just say, okay, yeah, I will. But yesterday you kind of gave us permission to say, well, why? And maybe if you investigated deeper, you might even believe it more. Or if you lived it more, maybe you'd find out it to be more true than you even know. But so we're on that path as older people, but tell us about the 20-somethings. Tell us about the world out there, our kids in the church, outside the church. What are they thinking about the Bible? Like, what is on the street? They're like, no, this can't possibly be true. Or, yeah, I guess. Or what are you hearing? Like, what do we know?
Yeah, they're hungry.
Yeah?
They're very hungry. I think for a long time, the Bible was just a book on the shelf.
Yeah.
And if you go back historically, Martin Luther in the Catholic Church, they really disagreed on the fact that Martin Luther wanted the Bible to be accessible to everybody. And so he translated it.
Yeah.
And so he put it in people's hands, and the Catholic Church was not happy. And then fast forward to where we're at now, and I feel like people have kind of given away the freedom of having that in their hands to actually tangibly read. So the younger people are saying, no, we want to read this. What's this about? Are you telling me that there's more to life than just money? Are you telling me there's more to life than what I'm feeling right now? Because I just went through a whole thing for 2 years, and I got to know. I got to know. And so I'm seeing a bunch of young adults step in, and students step in, and younger people just like, hey, tell me more about this, because I need to know. And they're not so much on fluff. Don't give me the cool story from the guy over there 4 states away. Tell me what you're saying.
Right.
What are you saying? And be very, very clear
right.
with what you're saying, so that I can wrestle with it, because I don't mind wrestling with hard things. And I think that's been a big shift. In a lot of ways. Like, we've had a long season in the country of relative peace, relative kind of like not really rocking the boat. I mean, there was September 11th happened, and then for like 20 years, and then a pandemic. I mean, there's these things right now that are so rocky.
Yeah.
People are looking at the world being like, whoa, a lot is going on. People are clinging to something they can rely on. And I think when we get the young adults in the room, they're like, tell us more about that.
Right.
Which has been, we're not doing anything crazy, but just telling them the gospel.
Right. And
throwing a couple of apologetics in there when your atheist friend comes up to you and says, I don't believe in it, and they haven't read it. How do they know? I mean, that's a really good question. What do you mean you've never read it? You said you don't believe in something you've never read. How do you know you don't believe in it? You should at least read it.
Yeah.
Because then you at least can argue the points
right.
better. I mean, like, you should at least just read it to see what you don't believe in. And if it's all the resurrection is the only thing you don't believe in, well, there's still some really good stuff in there that'll help you in your life, whether you believe in it or not. I just so happen to think that the grave was empty, so there's more hope for me in that regard, and that's a different conversation, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. The young people are eating it up, though. They want it. They want more like this, I think. And I think older people are, too. I think people are just kind of like, okay, let's get back to, tell me what this is saying. Let's get back to this. Let's help me understand this. And so we're throwing in more understanding words like acrobos, this Greek word of, this is what that means. You think it means completely investigate, but what it really means is that he's putting his stake in the ground saying, I know this is true because it's with exactness.
Yeah.
I've done enough research to be sure.
Right.
And that's a big deal.
You did a lot of Greek yesterday. You did the acrobos, and then you did the many.
Many equals many. That was a hit. It's just so funny to me. It's just my personality coming out a little bit. Actually, I saw somebody else do that, and I was like, oh, that's really funny. I'm going to put it in because that made me giggle.
Yeah.
And it was a hit. And I was like, yeah, okay. I can't even take credit for it.
Can't you just tell that people are following along? Like, people are like, okay, well, I don't need to dissect every word. We can just take every word for its meaning, face value, and it can be valuable to the discourse. So
yeah.
So I was thinking, you were talking about, can we trust the Bible? And you basically said, it's not the extraordinary event, Jesus' death and resurrection. It's that we need to be able to trust. We need to be able to trust the source.
Yes, which is a very careful line.
Okay, so dance in there a little bit and tell me why you decided to go that direction.
Yeah. I do think that the idea of this extraordinary event where Jesus raises from the dead is like, I do think it's out there.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, like, if I had no other context for that, that's like, oh, okay, I've never seen anybody raised from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
So that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there would be some tension for me. But when I've got people who saw it,
Yeah.
and then they had the knowledge to write it down, I can't argue with that.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of ways, I can't argue with what you saw.
Yeah.
And then taking this further, and this is probably a peek into week 4 a little bit, you take that a little further, those same guys died for
Right.
it. I don't know anybody who would die for something that wasn't true.
Right.
I mean, if I saw you fly, everybody could tell me it didn't happen, but I saw it. I saw you fly.
Right.
That's unbelievable. That's extraordinary, but I saw it. You can't ever convince me otherwise.
Right.
And I was trying to get to that point where the sources who are there, if they're telling me this happened and there's enough of them saying the same thing,
Yeah.
I have a hard time not believing it.
Right.
It's not just one person. It's multiple people saying the same thing. And then you go into, I mean, we didn't even get into like Josephus, and there's a couple of historical writers in that time talking about Jesus. And they're saying like, yeah, like, people are claiming this dude's walking the earth again. Like the Romans killed him and they're claiming he's alive.
So there were other writers out there besides the one that finally made it into the Bible.
Yes.
There were other like stories being written down because they thought it was so important. We are writing this down, even though he was from Nazareth and nothing good comes from Nazareth. And we've got to write this down so that people will know.
Yeah. And they used to say it was like, those who follow the way.
Yeah.
That line. And the way, like, I mean, the word Christian was a derogatory term. It actually didn't help you. It hurt you. And they still followed it. And these guys are historically writing down events saying like, this is what's happening right now. Mm-hmm. They had no skin in the game. They didn't follow Jesus. Mm-hmm. They weren't following the way. They were talking about those who follow the way. Mm-hmm. But here's what happened. And that's not in the Bible. Right. It's other contexts. The annals, there's just, there's all these things that are out there, and there's so much evidence supporting this. And then the Bibles, these documents are the most copied documents of any literary work ever. And it was extremely expensive and time consuming to do that. They didn't have paper pen. They had, wax tablets, and it would have taken a lot of time because you don't want to get it wrong. And I mean, the fact that they were doing that, why would you do that? Unless it alludes to being true, unless this is true. There are this many people who were there who saw it that are saying, yeah, no, I was there. Yeah. I appreciate that you disagree. I appreciate that you've got a bunch of rules and regulations for how someone gets into heaven. But like this dude said, I will die, and 3 days later I will rise again. And then he did it. I'm with him. Yeah. Simply. But I think the sources are the thing that draws me, the skeptic, into that. Because without the sources being credible, the story is a little bit unbelievable. But when those sources are reliable, oh man. Right. That opens up, okay. Because because in those sources, Jesus is not the first person to raise from the dead. Mm-hmm. We talk about Jesus like it's unbelievable. We don't talk about Lazarus like that's unbelievable, because there were so many witnesses day of. Jesus walks up to Lazarus and says, Laz, come on out, man. Mm-hmm. And they're all like, wait a minute, is this happening? Really? Yeah. And then there's a couple children that Jesus raises from the dead. I mean, the scripture's full of, this is not the first time. Yeah. And so when you start seeing the reliability of these sources, these guys were in the room. 2 of those guys were in the room when these things happened. Yeah. 2 of them were standing by Jesus when Lazarus raised. I mean, this is like wild. Yeah. And it's trustworthy. And that's where I get really, I get amped up about. It's like, this is so true. And it's not so much about the event, even though the cornerstone of our faith is the death and resurrection of Jesus. That makes sense to me. It's these sources that are telling the event that just make it move from undeniable to believable. Mm-hmm. From unbelievable to undeniable. Like it moves that category to, it's out there, it's a little far-fetched, but I believe this. Mm-hmm. And I have enough evidence to believe in this.
Mm-hmm. So you said, you know what I was thinking yesterday, though? Like you told us about Luke and how he wasn't an eyewitness, but that he knew the eyewitnesses and he wrote it down and he carefully investigated everything. But as a normal person, how would I look into, well, what about Matthew? What about Mark? What about John? How do I know they're credible witnesses? We just know that they were there. And how do I, if I'm a normal person walking the street, how do I look into a source and decide I'm going to be willing to believe the source?
Yeah, I love the context of these authors. So Matthew, taking him right out the gate. I mean, the first thing Matthew does is explains the lineage of Jesus. I'm such a pastor thing. I'm actually reading through Matthew very slowly right now. I'm actually reading through Matthew. In the first 2 chapters, there are 5 fulfilled prophecies from hundreds of years before in the first 2 chapters. And Matthew spends majority of his time really promoting fulfilled prophecy of the Messiah that came from Old Testament scriptures hundreds of years before, because Matthew is writing to the people, the Pharisees, who are the guys that were supposed to see him. So the Pharisees' their job was going to be, hey, when the Messiah comes, we'll let y'all know. Yeah. And they let us know. They hung him up there.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they're the ones who crucified him, which is wild when you think about, you think about church people, right? I mean, the Pharisees are the church people.
Right.
And at this time, the church didn't exist. There was a synagogue and all that, but the temple and all that. So like, they were supposed to say, this is the guy based on all of this evidence we see. And so Matthew writes and says, hey, here's all that evidence y'all missed.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, I saw him alive after you killed him. Do you remember that? Because I was there and I saw it and I'm writing it down just so you remember. And he writes primarily to the Pharisees. I mean, that is brilliant.
Yeah.
He's not out here writing to the world. He's saying, hey, all of you who thought you had it,
yeah,
let me explain all the things that you missed. And then you got a guy like Mark. I call Mark the hype man. Like Mark and Peter were close. So Peter wrote later in the New Testament, but he and Mark were close. And Mark wasn't actually there. He was good friends with Peter, and Peter was telling him all these stories. So you notice Mark is the shortest gospel, and it's got a bunch of like the hype stories, like that Jesus, blind man, raised from the dead. It was like and it's all this like, woo, oh yeah, by the way, he raised from the dead. What? And mic drop and dips out. 15 I think chapters, and then you got John, who's Jesus' best friend.
Yeah, the love.
And you get such a different perspective. John is not like, he's writing. He's like, hey, look, let me tell you about this guy who's a dear friend of mine. I'm not telling you about the Messiah. I'm telling you about Jesus, who I believe is the Messiah. Let me tell you more about him. And then you have Luke, who's like, okay, I got to write. I think Luke was a little bit of a skeptic. I think Luke was like, I've heard all this stuff. I got to figure this out for sure. And then I think God for Luke, because he wrote it down in order as he explored it and as it happened. I mean, just think about the amount of time that takes. You're not just going hearing a story from someone, start writing it down. Years maybe.
Yeah.
He could have started the moment. He could have started 3 weeks after Jesus was crucified, and then gotten it done in 60, 80. Years of research. That's just gives a lot of credibility to the actual story.
Yeah.
And there's beautiful harmony in there. One of the things with that video that I wanted to prove with our Tim Tebow event is that multiple people can tell the same story from different points of view, and it doesn't make it less true.
Right.
And I think that's a knock that people give against the Bible. Well, they're all saying something different. Well, okay, if you saw a car accident on 4 different corners, everybody's got a different perspective. Right. So, yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
That everybody would give a different story. But if we're all saying, hey, the car accident happened, did the car accident not happen just because we have a different viewpoint?
Right.
And I think those are really logical conclusions. I don't think they're far-fetched at all. So I think there's so much beauty to that. And I think if people really, the best part is it's so discoverable now.
Yes.
You can go on a search quick and find so many things about these authors because there's so much to learn, and so many people who are much smarter than us explored it and historically explored it and put it on some sort of document and made it available to people.
It's, I thought that was, genius is an extreme word. Can't remember the word Dan used, but he thought it was genius that you brought your friend John in and, had him tell the story yesterday on video to, do you believe the story of me and Tim Tebow? We're like, I don't know. Like it sound what? No pictures? Like you
Right.
said, oh, he couldn't take pictures. We're like, yeah, that sounds, whatever. I know you, so I'm like, oh, he probably wouldn't lie. But people don't know you, so
Right.
they're like, whatever. So then you tell this sermon, then you bring John on, which he seemed nice enough, but then he tells the same thing without any prompts from you. But he tells how he ran this fantastic route, It's like it's his viewpoint of how he saw the day unfold. And so I think it was exactly what you intended it to be, which was this is the same story, just from a different vantage point. It makes the crux of the story is true. Tim Tebow was there with his buddies, and he played football with us in Colorado behind the school.
Yeah.
It really happened. And this is some of the things I remember a little bit, he didn't care that you weren't QB1. He cared that he got to run the route.
Yeah.
And so he kind of told that one and whatever. So I thought that was... it was really good because I think in both services, then didn't people applaud after that?
Yeah.
It was kind of like this applaud, like, oh, they clicked with me now.
It was like a golf clap. It was like, okay, nicely done. Yeah, we see you now.
But
and it was fun. It was
but
good.
that's exactly what's going on here, because I think when people read the Bible and they come at it, they're like, I guess I should read the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
People say I should start with the Gospels, maybe. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You had your own order. I usually tell people to start with John. I don't know why. And so people come at it. They're like, why'd they repeat themselves? Like, why do 3 of them include this? One of them includes this. What da 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 da? And you're like, because it all adds to the story. We put them all together and we kind of get a bigger picture of the story, right?
Yeah. And we love that. We watch shows like that.
Yeah.
We watch movies like that. I mean, have you ever seen a really good thriller where it doesn't come together till the end? I mean, people love that. We sell that as entertainment now, and we eat it up as human beings. We love when the whole picture comes together. But for some reason, we read the Bible and we have issues with it. And it's this really weird dance of, could you just read it?
Yeah.
Can you just explore it? Just it's worth it. It's worth
Right.
your time to explore. No matter where you land on it, can you just explore it? Because I think if people really processed it, it comes together and it's better than any movie you've ever seen because it's true.
So give me the nudge for the person that we're saying they should read it, whether they're the skeptic or they are the believer that's kind of taken hearsay of who Jesus is and whatever. I'm going to read it for myself. And they're like, sometimes people turn to Genesis and they're like, I'm going to start there. You'll
Don't
be
start
like,
there.
no. Yeah. So give it to me. Like, what version? How do I do it? Do I read it on my phone? Do I listen to it? Do I buy a Bible in the bookstore? Like, where do I start? How much do I read it all in a day? What do I do?
Yeah, definitely don't read it in a day. I take a chapter at a time personally. And sometimes you get into it and you're just in it and you're like, oh, I'm eating this up tonight. For some reason, it's better than, playing the video game or watching the movie right now. I'm just in this story. And sometimes just take it slow. I think the hard part, people like, I have to read it.
Yeah.
And it becomes a chore, and it's not. It's a gift. It's an opportunity for you to read. Like, literally, someone got excommunicated so that you could read it, like going back to Martin Luther. So there's this big historical context that people don't know because, I don't know if we don't just talk about it, but why would you? It's, all this stuff. You're going to read this thing, step into it and read it. What I'd like to say is read it for the first time, which is incredibly difficult to do. So it's a little bit of a challenge to say, take everything you know about this, everything your parents told you, everything I may have said or Dan may have said.
Or America.
Yeah, like take it all out for a minute and just read it and tell me what you learn about Jesus. Just the guy.
Yeah.
Because you can't argue that he lived.
Right.
That's a bad argument. There's too much historical context to know he lived. Nobody can even argue that he was crucified by the Roman Empire. That's not an argument. I actually got into an argument with that the other day. I'm like, that's not an argument though. Like, that's not, I love you as a human being, but that's not a valid argument because it's all over historical documents. It's not just one Bible. It's like everywhere. Everybody's arguing what happened 3 days later. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, we can have that conversation.
I'm good with that. Yeah, that's a good argument. Let's talk about that. What do you think? Is it even plausible? Is it? And so when you get into that, just read it. Just read it. Because for the most part, I look at Luke. I mentioned Luke 2 in one of the sermons. I can't remember which one. It's just like this little drop in. But in Luke 2, the birth of Jesus, there are so many things that pigeonhole Luke to a specific date and time. That if you were making it up, when you make up stories, you make up stories that are wide. Because I don't want you to be able to poke a hole in it. I didn't give you enough detail. even yesterday, my Tim Tebow story was intentionally broad. I didn't give you dates, even though I have them. I didn't give you specific locations like addresses. I didn't give you certain things, even though they're in my notes. And I didn't do that because I didn't want to pigeonhole myself to a time, really, because I don't know if he was supposed to be out there. It's the whole thing. I don't know if you're supposed to say that. I didn't want to give any evidence to anybody listening that maybe potentially could come back at him, because I don't want to hurt his world and his testimony, what he's doing in the world. But like, this story is so crazy good, but I didn't pigeonhole myself in, but Luke does. And Matthew does, specifically with like, hey, this is the lineage of Jesus. Yeah, you can actually study that anywhere else, and it doesn't need the Bible to do that. Like, you can study that. Yeah. You see John do that. You see these guys go way in on specific moments and specific events. They're so specific that if they weren't true, they wouldn't be in there. And at least they would have been quickly debunked by everybody who was there. Jesus wasn't walking around with just 12 dudes all the time.
Right. People were watching.
All the time. People were following him. Thousands of people walking behind this guy just wherever he goes. When Jesus was rolling into a town, there was a certain point when people were like, okay, we've gone too far away from home. And there was a certain point where people were like, yeah, but we're picking him up from here. You know, it's like the handing of the baton. And I mean, he was never alone. The only times Jesus got to be alone, he would retreat to a secluded place on his own. And he would do it in the middle of the night, because it's the only time everybody's sleeping. I can finally get away, finally get a moment to myself. And he would do that. I mean, he was never alone. All those introverts out there, like, this is your worst nightmare. You know, like, that was Jesus. Jesus, like, he had this one trip. He's on his way over, and he's thinking, oh, we'll go across the river. It's going to be great. We're going to get to the other side. We'll give me a couple days of, catch up. He steps up there. Everybody's sitting right there. He's like, here we go again. Yeah. Rally up, probably slapping his face a couple times. Like, let's go. You know, maybe he's stretched. I don't know. Yeah. And he gets into it. So I think when you think about that, I mean, there's not like this guy's out there in obscurity doing these things. He's being watched by thousands, maybe more. Right. Maybe more, maybe tens of thousands, maybe millions, depending on how many people were walking the earth that time. So,
yeah. So say we read the Gospels and we're like, okay, I'll buy it. Like, as a Christ follower, I can buy the story of Jesus from the Bible. But the Bible is more than just the Gospels. Yes, so walk me through your thought process there about how you led me from, if the sources of the Gospels are credible, and I can believe that, then everything in the letters that comes after and the things that they're telling me, ways I should then live out this faith, and then maybe even the Old Testament, how does that lend to their credibility then?
Yeah, so the New Testament after those four, and really you can throw Acts in there because Luke wrote Luke and Acts, and a lot of people thought that was just one full document, and that got split for when they created the Bible in the 4th century, because it does tell the after story. So it makes sense why they put, hey, this is everything that happened. Jesus dies, and then after story. It's all pointing back to what these four are talking about. It's talking about this one guy that is the most, he is the most in-your-face guy, diverse. He's the most polarizing guy in the history of the world. And so everything that comes after is talking about that, except for Revelation, which is talking about, because of that, he's coming back again, by the way. And then the Old Testament is all this story of God choosing this group of people, and what Jesus did for us was became God in human form. So I actually think, my brain works like, the Old Testament is so rich and so good, but there's this idea, I think, from the human perspective of a God that wants to punish sin and punch you in the face when you're in trouble and get mad and destroy cities and floods and all that. And there's this idea that, like, because of God's justice, we always contribute God's love, but we always leave out his justice. Like, God is so just that like any injustice can't stand in front of him. Like America, if you would figure this out, like, actually, if we want justice in this world, let's start following God's plan, not ours, because he's the only just God. Anyway, I get excited. You get me excited. So with that, you have God's justice. And I think Jesus comes in to explain God in a humanity way. I think he comes in and says, hey, look, you've heard it said, but this is what it is. You've heard it said, but this is what it means. You guys have this idea, because we as humans, we put boundaries around things. And he's like, break these boundaries down, man. Like, that's not what it meant. God's not out here trying to seek and destroy. And because of that, God was like, we got to pay this debt somehow. And the only way to do that is I got to go. Yeah. I got to send myself as Jesus, 3 in 1 in the Trinity. And that's a whole thing. But I think that gives you credibility to these. I mean, the Old Testament to me reads like historical. This is a document following a group of people that God chose. And there's this bilateral covenant piece. And then you get to Jesus, and now it's a unilateral covenant. The unilateral covenant is God did this, and you have access to it. The bilateral covenant is you do this, and God will do this. But the unilateral is Jesus comes in, pays that sacrifice for us, raises from the dead, which means the check cleared on our debt payment. And because of that, we have access to God in a way that our injustice, our sin, our grossness filters through the lens of Jesus to get to God. And now God sees us, and he sees Jesus through us. For those who believe in Jesus, for those who believe in the death and resurrection of Jesus. It's not for everybody. I think that's a hard thing for people, because it's not for everybody.
Right.
And it's open to everybody, anybody who would believe. But I think that's a big piece of that. And I think that's worth exploring.
Right. Well, even in the day when you said people followed Jesus in the day, and then they were drawn to him and they followed the way, even after Jesus's resurrection, not everybody did. Not everybody did. So, there are going to be people we talk to when we say, do people that you work with know this about you? The goal isn't necessarily even to convince them. The goal is to represent Jesus for who he is.
Yep.
And if that's enough to that they're drawn to that, then that's it. But not everyone will be.
Yeah, and isn't it? I think it's in John, like near the end of John. I think it's John, where it says Jesus raises from the dead, and he's stepping in. He's kind of giving the last commission, the Great Commission, like, hey, go out. And it says people were walking in, and many believed, and there were some who still didn't. And they were there.
Yeah.
They saw him die. They saw him get buried. They saw him raise from the dead. And they're like, sell.
I don't know. Pass.
Like, cool trick, bro. What?
Yeah.
So I think that's for me. I think a lot of people want to wrestle skepticism, the skeptical mindset with, just believe. And it's like, that's not enough for people. Even the people who were there, it's still not enough. This is a wrestling match. And I think it's one of the most important wrestling matches of our world. Like, it is more important than your career. It really is. It is the most important thing in this world, and people don't wrestle with it. Like, you can be so good at a career and it's effortless, but this takes time and energy, and it's worth your time and energy. And I think the further away we get from Jesus as a culture, the further away we get from Jesus as a country, the more tensions you're going to start seeing. And it's interesting. The people that are, they look fearless. They look like they're just settled. I'll bet you those people are the ones who have faith. I'll bet you those people are believing in something bigger than just what's going on around them. And those are the inspiring stories. Those are the unbelievable stories that I think are really, really, really good.
So give us some Pastor Brent passion as we leave, because suppose you said we should live it. If we believe it, we should live it. And we should all be reading it, dust it off this shelf. And we talked about maybe where you might start or whatever. But I'm like, talk to the person who just is like, I come to church on Sunday, and that's what we pay Brent to do. He unpacks it for me, and he makes it more, I can understand it more when he tells me, and when Dan tells me, and Nate and Sam and whatever. But I can't do it on my own, and it seems too confusing, and I've tried before, or this is enough. I'm going to just sip on the scriptures instead of super big gulp the scriptures.
Yeah.
Give me some passion on that. Tell me why that's gonna
Yeah, you're just missing out.
Yeah.
I mean, you're just missing out. So I read from NIV.
Okay.
As it's not new, it's not King James, it's not the Message, it's somewhere, it's closer to the original wording. The reason I do that is it gets me closer to the Greek. So the word itself, I can find those words, and they're closer to. If you're just starting out, though, and I don't know if this is like okay, but the Message is not the worst scripture to read.
Right.
It's just not going to get you as close to the original context. So the Message was written, and it wasn't really written was not meant to be a version of the Bible. It was meant to help get this into layman's terms, the culture of today, and just help you understand what the wisdom is. It's a good stepping stone toward what I would argue. I think NIV is really good. I'm not sure that it's like the best. I don't know if we're gonna. The Bible needs to be at war with itself, but it's really good and it's easy to understand and it makes sense. And then it's just like old school stuff of you read it, and if you don't understand it, ask somebody. Guys like me study this stuff. I mean, this is my career. This is what I studied for 10 years. If you studied this for 10 to 15 years, I would expect you to be kind of where I'm at. So it makes sense that you may not know all of the things I know, and I wouldn't want you to. But man, if you aren't even trying, you're not even stepping in. You know how I learned? I read it. And then when I didn't know something, we have this beautiful thing on the internet called Google. And man, you can just pull up things from all over the place. It's amazing. I mean, you can have so many things come right at your fingertips. And this is why our Q is dropping, because we don't have to retain it. We just Google it again.
Yeah.
But the point being, I'm so passionate about people reading the Bible.
Yeah.
Even if you don't believe in it, because if this is true, it means something.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
I mean, just that alone. I mean, if it's true, that means something. And that alone is worth your time. It's worth your energy. And I think for me, super passionate about the reality that people died for this. And we just take it for granted. We just take it for granted. We say, people are literally dying to get a Bible into countries, trying to smuggle Bibles into a country. And I got 6 on my shelf. You know, like, come on.
Right.
At the very least, give your Bible. If you're not going to read it, go give it away. Go give it to somebody who will, because you're wasting a resource that is the life-giving hope of the world. That this scripture is going to help us understand Jesus, and Jesus is going to change people's lives.
Right.
And you're like, man, I don't know if you're being honest, Brent, because everybody you know who follows Jesus and they follow him well, you want those people to work for you. You want them to be your bosses. You want them to be the person that you're reporting to, because you know what? They're working through a different filter than every other boss. And I believe that people will stay with those people longer for less money and less opportunity in their career, because man, that guy treats me like a human being. And Jesus is the first person to do that. Like, I wrote a book about this a little bit, like how you spend your time and energy. And so this coming out this summer, I'm super excited about it. But
Brent, the author.
I know, I'm so pumped. I'm over the moon about it. But in that, it's like you got this Jesus guy, and I defy anybody to come to me with a social movement that doesn't trace back to Scripture. I defy anybody. Why do we care so much about human rights? Who put humans on? Who did that? Why do you care about women equality and equity? Why? Oh, because there's this guy named Jesus who stepped in and started caring about some women. You know? Why do you care about kids? Why do we care about the orphans and the homeless? Why do we do that? Why do we care? I mean, if it's all evolution, if it's all biology, it's survival of the fittest out here. Who cares? You didn't make it. But for some reason, we care. Where does that come from? We made it up? We're not that good. Look at what we do to the world. You know, we're not that good. There's a line in that book that says, I defy you to find a social movement that is good, that doesn't align with the biblical context. And if you could find one, I'd be all ears to hear it, and I'll bet you I could find the biblical context. But I think that it's a movement. It's a life-changing, world-changing, culture-changing movement. And if the church did a better job at chasing what Jesus taught us and allowing the movement, I don't think we'd have a lot of the issues we have today. I think our politicians would be better. I think people would be caring. I think people would care about the person next to them more about than my bottom line. I really believe that we've gone so far away from the biblical context of what Jesus taught that you're just seeing a bunch of people narcissistic and selfish trying to get theirs. And God says, Jesus says, yeah, you can't serve God in money. You can't serve your bottom line in God. Like eventually the way of Jesus is a servant way. And the way of Jesus is looking out for you more than I'm looking out for me. And the marriages that do that are so much better. Their goals, they're the ones that everybody wishes they had. Why is their marriage working? Oh, it's probably because in their own selfishness, which we are all selfish. I'm not like anti-selfish. I'm selfish too, but like in that selfishness, my first filter is it's not me first. It's my wife because of who I believe in and what God has taught me through Jesus. Like that's why, So I mean, that's that passion stuff I can get so amped up about that we just need to do better.
We need to do better because we need more of Jesus, and and the best way to understand the heart of Jesus and the heart that God had for us and his creation, he's written down this book for us. He had these people who are eyewitnesses write down this book for us so that we can see more of his heart. So as we approach the scriptures, to be able to go with not a, like you said, have to, but a get to, and we can see more of Jesus in that. And so my challenge to the skeptic of, yeah, I believe it, but I don't know. I mean, it seems kind of dry to me. Like, I don't know. I don't really have time. And, I'll get to it tomorrow kind of thing is my challenge would be, what's stopping you from trying? Read it too. Read it and see if God doesn't use it in a supernatural way to increase the vision of Jesus, increase your heart for loving others. There's a supernatural thing that happens when we read it. And I'm coming from, if you were the skeptic, I was the mail it in girl. And I was the girl that was like, yeah, I'll read the Bible. I'll kind of read the Bible. I'll read the Bible. And I kind of sure hope nobody finds out that I haven't read the Bible for a few days. There were a lot of years I did that.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if I didn't feel confident or I just didn't connect with it. And I was ashamed that I didn't read it as much as I knew I should be doing better. But I didn't. And I'm like, I don't know what to say to someone like me. It's just that get in there. If you got to have a friend, get a little accountable. Just try it. Say there's something in there. If it's real, then it matters. And and you showed us yesterday that the sources were credible, that this is a real powerful thing, this scripture that God gave us.
Yeah, and that comes to my challenge of if you're in on this, people should know that. Because I mean, and that's why guys like me get to stand on a stage and do that. Is like we want to make it come alive. I actually think pastors going over the next 20, 30 years, we're gonna have to be way more intellectually in tune with our culture, and we're gonna have to actually be able to bring this thing alive again. Because it's become like a dead book, but it's not. Yeah, there's so much in here, so worth your time, and I think like energy feeds energy, and so. And maybe if you're the mail it in person and you're like, it's boring, it's dry. Yeah, get with someone who's pumped about it. See if that doesn't hurt. Like that's not, at the very least, you're going to be entertained. At the very least, you're going to be like, yeah, okay, I'm into that. I remember the first time someone came to me and said, dude, have you ever heard the story of David and Goliath? I'm like, yeah. And he was like, I've never heard it before. It blew my mind. And I'm like, what? That's so cool. Let me tell you all these things. And it was just really cool to be a part of that. I think it's a big deal. I think there's a lot of movement going forward. I just believe there's an awakening coming in this country. I believe there's an awakening coming in this world. I don't think we're done yet. Yep. All those people who are like waiting for Jesus to come back, like get out of the way because I've got work to do. People need Jesus more than they need air, more than they need breath in their lungs. And if you're sitting here waiting on the porch, well, that's fine with me. I'll get out there. I'll start plowing the field because people need them. And that's all I know. That's why I'm on this earth. Help people know Jesus. That's it. And we're trying to do that at Hopevale. Help people know and follow Jesus. Yep.
Here we go. I love the passion that you bring, and I love that you and Dan are a part of our church body, and I can't wait to see where Hopevale is going next. So
appreciate it.
We got 3 and 4. Dan's preaching this week. I don't even know what it is.
Heaven and hell.
Oh.
It's a little topic.
Oh, sure. We'll tackle that in 30 minutes. And then you're coming back week 4 and you're going to talk
I'm doing, is Jesus the only way?
Oh, the only way.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Buckle in, people.
Yeah.
So
I'll let it loose on that one. Actually, Dan actually told me, he said, hey, this first one is the Bible. So this is probably more the intellectual. Brent, week 4 is passion.
Okay.
And he said, I want to see that. And I said, yes, sir.
Oh, well,
I can do that.
Buckle up.
I can do that.
All right. Hopevale, get ready. This is great. I'm glad we're on this journey together. So have the conversations, people. Have the conversations. And let's see Jesus show up. Let's trust that he's going to show up and move us closer to him and his heart. So thanks for listening today, and we'll see you next time when we do the Deeper Dive thing.
Thank you for watching the Deeper Dive video podcast. To check out our full library, make sure to subscribe by clicking the button below. Also make sure to select the bell icon in order to be notified of any new content as it is posted. If you would like to give to the Lord here at Hopevale and support the ministry, you can give by visiting hopevale.org/give. Thank you again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you and your family at Hopevale